Hey, it's Mazzy, and I'm gonna do an Elton John ranking. Don't run away. I love Elton John. With a big asterisk. I'm only doing Elton John records from the 1970s. In fact, I'm only doing Elton John records from the first half of the 70s with a little scotch of 1969, and I'm doing a ranking of the 10 records that I enjoy the most. Elton John is a fabulous piano player. He had a band in the mid 60s called Bluesology, which he was like the youngest member, and he just such a whiz piano player. And it was during the time of the great British blues revival of John Mayall and Blues Breakers, and then of course the Yardbirds and the Rolling Stones, countless others. I mean, the Brit bands were so entrenched in American blues and blues artists. It was crazy. It's great. It's wonderful. Where we kind of we didn't pay attention until they did it, brought it back to us, introduced us to the blues, and of course, we followed. Some of us followed a lot of the great blues artists, and to the credit, at least, in the late '60s into the '70s, a lot of those blues artists got introduced to a younger audience again, and they had their own careers. But that's another story for another video, maybe at some point. But Elton John, oh, by the way, at the end of this video, there's going to be just a few little outro photographs that I took on my very first Elton John concert, 1972, October, I believe, Berkeley Community Theater. My buddy Larry and I went, and we had literally front row. Our feet were on the stage. We could have done that, and it was great. It was fantastic. Before I jump into the 10, I do want to do a little kind of show a couple things. The Greatest Hits album, this is the first Greatest Hits album he had. However, this is a later edition I didn't even know existed. This is a Record Club edition that has volumes 1 and 2 in a single sleeve of the best of. And this is an album I acquired from the Coleman collection, and I didn't even know it was such a thing. He paid $6 for it used. It's fabulous, MCA. And why I want to show this is because there are a bunch of singles that I'm not including. He was so popular. If you were there, you know how popular Elton John was. And there might be some viewers of mine who are maybe too hip right now to like Elton John and got tired of his voice, like Fleetwood Mac and the Eagles. We heard those records so much, but I've been all in the last week on Elton John. And I am not surprised, but I'm reminded what great records they are, how well they were recorded, and I'll mention that as we dive in. But I want to just make a few shout outs here of some of these singles. Pinball Wizard, of course, from the Tommy movie. If you've seen the bit with Elton John playing pinball, and his version is fun. Don't Go Breaking My Heart, the duet he did with Kiki D. Lucy and the Sky Diamonds, I really enjoy his single version. And John Lennon sings on the chorus. He gets into a little bit of a reggae thing. A great, great comp. Two other things I want to show. I almost included this in my countdown, in my ratings, but I decided I didn't want to put this in my rankings. However, I bought this album when it came out in 1971, and just after that, this was in so many cutout bins, and you could get this record cheap. I still think you can find it cheap, and this is such a beautiful record. And me as a 16, 17-year-old, young in love at the time, this movie about two young, an English and a French girl who meet up right in that time, and it's very romantic, very sexual, which probably wouldn't pass mustard today, which is kind of too bad, and young sex and I wouldn't say it's explicit, but it was pretty pushing it for 1971. But what's great about this, it's a combination of these beautiful songs of Elton John. And now, before I go on, I should have started out mentioning Bernie Taupin. Elton John and Bernie Taupin were a team, have been a team on and off since the beginning, and started in 1967, I think, together. Fantastic. Bernie writes the lyrics. Elton is obviously the musician, the singer, writes the music, plays the music. And Bernie's not really a musician, doesn't play on the records. Very much like another writing duo were Gary Brooker and Keith Reed of Procol Harum, White a Shade of Pale, so on and so forth. Keith Reed did not play. He was basically a part of the band as the lyricist. And I would say they're kind of second only to Elton John and Bernie Taupin, a great collaboration in this unusual kind of setup. Maybe not unusual, but it's like goes to the old school of the songbook period of Rodgers and Hart and Burt Bacharach, Hal David, and everything. These are gorgeous songs, very romantic. And what I love about it, there's a common theme on most of these albums that I'm showing. They're produced by Gus Dudgeon, who to me just really brought out an amazing sound on Elton John records, and orchestrated by Paul Buckmaster. I suggest you find this cheap if you like Elton John. This is a time when his voice was beautiful. Gus Dudgeon would mix his voice up in most of his records and all his records, and there's a sound he got, which I'll talk about when I get into this. And lastly, I didn't include this either. I want to say posthumous release. That sounds like when someone dies, but this came out on Record Store Day just last year. And this was the album that was never released. And this is the time when Elton John, this was recorded in 1968. This is kind of worked on from 67 to 68, a typical follow-up to what was happening with popular psychedelic pop music like Sgt. Pepper and the Rolling Stones' Satanic Majesty's Request. Very sunshine pop. You could see and hear Elton and Bernie trying to find themselves. It's an interesting artifact and some fun stuff on it. I don't think it should be a proper album in a ranking, and I never knew that Elton John and Captain Kangaroo were the same person until this. I finally figured it out. The great psychedelic cover. Regimental Sergeant Zippo. 60s pop psych artifact, finally released. If you're a completist or you like sunshine pop and psychedelia, it's a fun record. It's trying. I stopped really enjoying Elton John up until he did an album called Blue Moves. And I'm not including Blue Moves. In fact, I don't even have it anymore. It's an album, a double album, that it's ambitious, very orchestrated. There's a classical side to it. I think there's only one great song from my point of view, maybe two. I really dislike that album, and it set me off on Elton John. And of course, at that point in 1976, I guess, the punk scene was starting to happen, the Ramones and everything. And I didn't like what he was doing. I'm Still Standing, the song in the 80s, it was all over MTV, the dance hit. He had a bunch of hits on and off, but I never really enjoyed that. That's a fun song as a one-off, but I really didn't enjoy that. And then in later years, there's a couple of things that I should note. In 1997, him and Bernie re-recorded Candle in the Wind, and Bernie Taupin rewrote the lyrics for Princess Di. This is there was a 12-inch single, I believe, and this is the 1997 version that he sang at the Princess Di's memorial. The version here of Elton John is produced by George Martin, and it's just a really beautiful, moving piece, obviously because of the situation with Princess Di. And two other that I have on CD, and I re-listened to these again, and I remember liking them somewhat, but these are the only two that I kind of like some of his later work, and that is Made in England, and this is produced by Greg Penny and Elton John. There's a song called Believe that opens up, which is kind of a really kind of Beatlesque somewhat. And I sort of like it, but it has some of that 90s drum sound that I'm not enamored with personally. And then Songs from the West Coast. And this was produced by Patrick Leonard, who had been working a lot with Madonna. You could see that he was trying to kind of revive and get a hit again. But I am not as knowledgeable, to be honest with you, of his later career work. I've seen him 3 times in my life, and I love Elton John. But these records, to me, are just wonderful records. Coming in at number 10 is Don't Shoot Me, I'm Only the Piano Player. The name comes from a quote of Groucho Marx said to Elton John. However, I mean, obviously the thing that I first gravitated to, which is sort of represented the way this is in a theater marquee, is a Francois Truffaut film, Don't Shoot the Piano Player. A great film with Charles Aznavour. But we're not talking about cinema here, we're talking about Elton John records. Number 10 for me. Now, this has the big hit Crocodile Rock. I can't listen to that anymore. His retro rock and roll stuff to me is tiring. In the 70s, it's a fun, feel good, upbeat song, but it doesn't do much for me. However, the other follow-up single on this was Daniel. I think Daniel is a beautiful song. So coming at number 10, I think the rest of the album is good, but not really fantastic. Coming at number 9 is Elton John's first album, Empty Sky. He recorded this at Dick James' studio, and this is before he hooked up with Gus Dudgeon, and there's some really wonderful things on here. It's a bit dated. This album never came out in the United States until 1975, and with a different cover that, to me, made no sense. A blue cover, an illustration of a pyramid, I believe. But it had been reissued. It has been reissued. This is how it came out in the United Kingdom. There's some really nice stuff on here. And he started working with Nigel Olsson on drums, who would be a fixture and a big, important sound, a part of that early sound. There's a song on here he's done several times called Skyline Pigeon. Beautiful ballad, Valhalla. Empty Sky is kind of great. The ending has a reprise where he kind of mixes 4 or 5 of the songs. They merge bits of the refrain of earlier songs on the album as a reprise, and I think it's a little forced. So this album, although it's good, and I think you can hear where Elton is going, it's kind of like listening to the first David Bowie records, when he was singing like Anthony Newley a little bit. Not quite the same. There's, again, a couple songs on here, especially Single Pigeon, which he will redo in later years. But this is number 9 in my list. Coming in at number 8, Caribou. Now, one album I don't have here from this period is Song for the Westies, which I kind of like, but it just, I don't know. So again, 10 albums in 6 years here. What a remarkable output of records. This is the record I believe he did after Yellow Brick Road. How do you follow up Yellow Brick Road with something? The Bitch Is Back, what a great rockin' opening, and that's a wonderful song. You're So Static is great. Don't Let the Sun Go Down on Me was the hit from this record. Beautiful ballad, epic ballad. Again, Gus Dudgeon's production is amazing on this, but there's a song on here that, to me, every time I hear it, it gives me chills, and it's the final song on the album called Ticking, and it's basically about a school shooting, and this is 1974, remember, someone going crazy and mowing down people with a gun. He's just a ticking time bomb. It's relevant today as ever, unfortunately. But this is number 8, Caribou. Call that because part of it was recorded at Caribou Ranch, their famous recording studio. And even in this top 10, even though some of them are at the bottom, they're all great records. Coming in number 7 now is Honky, Chateau. This has one of the greatest pop songs in Rocket Man, and Rocket Man's taken on a whole new image definition over the last few years because of North Korea and someone referring that head of state as Rocket Man. But it's a fantastic record. Gus Dudgeon produces, engineered by Ken Scott, who would go on and working with David Bowie, obviously, during this period. Mona Lisa and Mad Hatters, what a fantastic ballad. The sound Honky Cat is right out of that type of almost New Orleans style honky-tonk piano. The recording sounds exactly like that. And Mellow is also a great song. But I love the song. This is the reissue. I have back there the original, which had the special kind of unipack opening, pocketed opening. Let me say one thing about these pressings. The reissues that came out 2015, 2016 are really good. They're on DJM, Dick James Music, and they sound fantastic. If you go back to a video prior to this, where it's Saturday Night with Coffee Dave, I'm playing some of the reissues of several of the Elton John records, and they sound fantastic. Also, if you get a chance to find clean copies of the UK DJM, those are my go-to. Those are always my first choice, then the reissues. I'm not a fan, and I grew up with them, I'm not a fan of the American Uni and then MCA. A lot of those pressings are noisy. Back in the 70s, to me, when I worked in record stores, MCA were amongst the worst pressings. All the Who albums around that time, Quadrophenia, Who's Next, they tend to be a little noisy from my point of view. But find these reissues if you like these records, if you like the music, and they're fantastic. Now coming at number 6, again, I almost didn't include this, but I think it's a part of the catalog that is really important, and this is 171170. Now, us Americans, when we got this, it was called 11/17/70 because the rest of the world is backwards. And obviously this is recorded, there's no 17th month. This is recorded November 17th, 1970 in a recording studio for a live radio broadcast in New York City. And it's got the power trio. Now, of course, this is the proper way. You say day, month, year. So we all know that now. This is a UK press, DJM press. It's fantastic. Now, what's great about this, I would play this record all the time, and it really showcases what people probably saw when he played that famous Troubadour show in 1970, and just bowled over the critics, and it was no stopping from there. This is a power trio, if there ever was one, of Nigel Olsson, Dee Murray, and Elton. That's it. Those are the three. Elton John rocks and does ballads, and he rocks like Jerry Lee Lewis, and I'm sure, I don't know if he was jumping around during this recording, there was a small in-studio audience. This is fantastic. Take Me to the Pilot, he does a Honky Tonk Woman, a great cover of the Stones song. 60 Years On, Can I Put You On? Side 2 is Bad Side of the Moon and Burn Down the Mission, an epic ongoing just piano piece that takes over the whole side. Now, also a couple years ago during Record Store Day, they released it as the full show. So this also adds Indian Sunset, Amarina, Your Song, Country Comfort, Border Song, a couple other tracks. That's a double album. If you can find this, it's a great pressing. It's really nice. And this recording is a powerhouse. It's dry in the studio, live. And the thing I want to say about this is I missed a concert that I should have been at. And my friend Coleman saw Elton John at the Fillmore West. He went to see the Kinks play at the Fillmore West. I believe there were 3 nights there. Elton John opened up for the Kinks. And Coleman, we talked about this so many times. Elton John blew away the Kinks. He said after his set, the Kinks were like the worst band in the world. And Coleman and I are huge, huge Kinks fans. And that was just, they just didn't have it. I mean, to follow up what he was happening, this was a golden era of Elton John. And he owned, in a way, music and radio. And I think he got so popular that some people just, like anything else, they kind of like to then go after, and it affected him obviously personally as well. So that's a special album to me, and to me it belongs in a ranking of Elton John's discography. So I am limiting this to the first half of the 70s discography. Coming at number 5, now this I'll probably get some reaction from those of you who are Elton John fans. because this is usually considered his best album, his epic. You know what it is, Goodbye Yellow Brick Road. This is number 5 for me. And I just listened to it again twice this week. I know the album really well. Obviously, I got it when it first came out. This is a wonderful original UK, super clean DJM pressing, and it's the best sounding version of this record. Again, the MCA version, American version, is not too good. I don't have the regular reissue. I do have a yellow, I think it's a 2014 reissue, that sounds quite good as well. That's a limited numbered edition. But this is DJM. Now, of course, this is an amazing record. The opening of Funeral Friend that leads into Love Lies Bleeding is epic. It's one of the greatest double albums of all time. The original, Candle in the Wind, what a gorgeous song. Obviously originally written about Marilyn Monroe and then rejiggered for the Princess Di Memorial. Ends up side 1 with Benny and the Jets. Huge hit of this album. I could not stand that song when this album came out. I warmed up to it. I get what it is, but at the time, for some reason, it slowed this album down for me. So at end of side 2, we had records, I usually took it off. Goodbye Yellow Brick Road obviously is a good song. One of my favorite songs on Yellow Brick Road is Gray Seal. And what I love about it is how in the second verse, I believe in the third verse, his voice, his vocal is double tracked. And when you're blasting that through, like I did on a great stereo system, it's what is it, ADR, I think they called it, that they developed at Abbey Road originally, automatic double something or other, that they used with John Lennon's voice. John Lennon wasn't a fan of his voice, so a lot of times you'd hear this double track where they would automatically double track it. He wouldn't sing to himself again in some cases. And that's what you're hearing, I believe, on this. I don't know that for a fact. Some producer out there, engineer, will be able to enlighten me a little more about that. But when that comes in, when his voice comes in, it reminds me how John Lennon does that on the second verse, the chorus of Isolation from the Plastic Ono Band record. And it's just beautiful. The embarrassing thing that embarrassed me again is the song after that, Jamaica Jerk Off. Funny novelty song, throwaway as far as I'm concerned on this. Sweet Painted Lady, Dirty Little Girl, All the Young Girls Love Alice is a fantastic song. Your Sister Can't Twist, but She Can Rock and Roll. Now, that goes along with Saturday Night's All Right for Fighting. I like that. Out of all his sort of rock and roll upbeat numbers, that's probably my favorite. It's a bit of a cliche now, but when he does these retro 50s things, they were fun in the moment, but to me lasting, I don't enjoy him as much. And he ends with Harmony that probably should have been a single off this, but they decided to hold off on the single because the next album, Caribou, was coming out, and they wanted to get singles ready for that, and it was too close to that release. But fantastic album, and I'm not denying the wonderment of this record. Fantastic double album, one of the great double albums of all time. But number 5 for me, because I think there's a lot of filler on it that doesn't hold up. Number 4. What a beautiful record this is. Madman Across the Water. This record, what's really interesting about this record, the 2 greatest songs are front-loaded. When does that happen? I don't know if they thought about it at the time, but Tiny Dancer, what a great epic anthem ballad. Of course, now it's hard to divorce ourselves from hearing a bus full of rockers on the road with groupies in the film Almost Famous singing that song as they're driving. It's kind of one of those make you feel good songs and moments in that film. Fantastic. Fantastic piano playing, fantastic production, again, by Gus Dudgeon. But it goes right into one of my all-time favorite Elton John songs, and that's Leave On. I was born a pauper to a pawn on a Christmas day when the New York Times said God is dead and the war has begun. Alvin Toffler had a son today, and he shall be Leave On. Some thought early on that was a song written kind of in a tribute, not about Levon Helm of the band, because Elton and Bernie Taupin were huge fans of the band, of Music from the Big Pink and the second album, all their albums. They loved that. And when we get to upcoming album, there's a direct link there in a way. But I think he said later, Bernie Taupin, that was not about Levon. Who knows? Does it matter? Great song, epic song, amazing lyrics, wonderful. Razorface on here is great. Madman Across the Water is just a beautiful epic, and I believe there's an expanded CD for you CD people that has an outtake of that goes on, I think, for 7, 8, 9 minutes, the piano on that, and it's just stunning, really beautiful on here. A Holiday Inn's a nice song. Indian Sunset. Love this record. Comes with a book. The original did, and this is the reissue. This is my number 4. What a great catalog of those early records from 1970s. Okay, coming at number 3, and the album, this could have been my number 1 record. This was huge, one of his biggest records, Captain Fantastic and the Brown Dirt Cowboy, with this beautiful illustrated cover by Alan Aldridge, the illustrator who compiled the Beatles illustrated lyrics. He drew some things, and there's all these great illustrators adding to different lyrics of the Beatles back in the 70s. Fantastic cover for this. This is an important album. It's sort of semi-autobiographical of Elton and Bernie Taupin. Huge hit. This came out at a time when Elton could do no wrong. In theory, he was everywhere. It was soundtracks everywhere, on tour. Elton John, probably the biggest star on earth at this point in time, or at least one of them, the biggest selling single artist of the 70s, as I said. This was huge. To me, this is a masterpiece in production. Gus Dudgeon does something. The way he mics Nigel Olsson's drums are just short of spectacular. They're loud, they're bombastic. This came out of a time after Elton attempted to commit suicide. He was married to a woman for a number of years. He was closeted. He was going through the trials and tribulations of being a homosexual in the entertainment business and hiding it and not admitting it to himself or especially to the world. And he almost died. And the song on here that him and Bernie write, Someone Saved My Life Tonight, is literally perfection. When the drums come in about 2 minutes into the song, I think, it's one of the most bone-chilling. You really feel his voice of someone going through a suicide attempt, someone who has friends or relatives who have died that way. It's an amazing song, especially because we know, obviously, he survived. The opening, Captain Fantastic and the Brown Dirt Cowboy, is about the two of them really starting out in the music business and becoming friends, and this great partnership of musical collaboration that has lasted so long. Tower of Babel 2. Side 2, the second song, Better Off Dead. If you want to drive your neighbors crazy, blast that and listen how Gus Dudgeon mic'd those drums again and how just sharp and dead they are. No reverb. They almost seem overblown, but they're fantastic on this record. Again, probably the best recorded of all the albums, from my opinion. Got to get a meal ticket. It's got a great vibe to it. It's got a great sound. This is a very crankable record, and it's a very moving record. So it's number 3 on my list of Elton John albums ranked. Number 2. This also could have been my number 1 record. And when I think about this is his officially 3rd record, but 2nd record we knew in America, and that's Tumbleweed Connection. This is an Americana record before we even knew what Americana was. This is the direct link, the direct influence of Bernie Taupin and Elton John's love of the band and the writings, the music, the songs of Robbie Robertson with the band, the singing voice of Levon Helm and the rest of them. This is a cowboy record. This is not a country rock record, but it's got that soulful country feeling like the band had early on, well, the entire lifespan of the band. A very favorite group of mine. Beautiful cover package. It's came with a lovely book. There was a time when, Elton John records were selling, so they could afford to put these lovely books together. And a couple of these songs would appear on that live 1711-70 album. We got Ballad of a Well-Known Gun, Son of Your Father, Country Comfort. Now, what's great about these first few albums too are the harmonies, the blue-eyed soulness of these songs with background vocals of Leslie Duncan, Maggie Bell. I think Dusty Springfield is on one or two of his songs on his records. Later Kiki D, as I said, would be on his records. But you got this great country feel. Not typical country rock, but just a great fusion of British and Americana together. Where to Now, St. Peter is a perfect song. Burn Down the Mission, which is an epic version on that 1711-70, is just stunning. There's one song on this album that Elton and Bernie did not write, and that's called Love Song. And that was composed by Leslie Duncan. And acoustic guitar and backing vocals are Leslie Duncan. And it's one of the most gorgeous songs you'll ever hear Elton John sing. It's very low-key, it's beautiful. Just magical, just magical. What a great record. 1970, Tumbleweed Connection. Think about this, 10 records in like 5.5 years. I mean, what the Beatles did, 14 records in 8 years? Something like that. What a time, what a creation. Elton John, number 2, the great album, Tumbleweed Connection. Okay, what's left? This might not have been a number 1 album, but this ranking is a personal ranking. The debut in America, Elton John's self-titled record, 1970, is a perfect record. Your Song, it's a little bit funny, that feeling inside. What a gorgeous piece of music. The collaboration on this album, the production of Gus Dudgeon, the lyrics of Bernie Taupin, the personal lyrics of Bernie Taupin, the majestic lyrics of Bernie Taupin, the wonderful piano playing and music of Elton John, the orchestration of Paul Buckmaster. And I love how both Gus Dudgeon, the producer, and Paul Buckmaster are included here as if it's a band picture. What a great album. The song, Your Song, is what we heard in America first, how Americans and how people here fell in love with Elton John. That was all over the radio. Take Me to the Pilot is a perfect gospel song. It's a perfect blue-eyed soul song. So good that it was covered by Aretha Franklin on Young, Gifted, and Black, and her version, I mean, this version is friggin' great, but her version is just elevates it on a different level. It's almost as if it was written for Aretha Franklin. However, Elton at this point has his chops. He has a soul in his piano playing. He has the gospel sound of the piano. And the way Gus Dudgeon mics and records the piano is just stunning. I first heard this record when I was 16 years old, and there's one song on here that in a way haunted me, and that is 60 Years On. The orchestration of Paul Buckmaster goes on for about a minute. It almost starts out with this kind of buildup of these violins, almost avant-garde, almost abrasive, almost 20th century composers of the out there movements of classical arrangements. And then it goes into this beautiful orchestration that envelops the entire song. But for some reason over the years, whenever I hear this song, and I play it a lot, I kept thinking, God, these two, they're probably 22, 23 years old at the most when they wrote 60 Years On, when it was written. And there's a Spanish guitar on here, acoustic sound that goes through the entire song, played by Colin Green. And it's so beautiful. And the guitar playing and the orchestration, less piano based, it's a mood piece. It's a vision of growing old. I can't even imagine Bernie Taupin, what he was thinking. When I was in my 50s playing that song, thinking, oh God, what were they thinking? 60 years was old when 1970 to Elton John and Bernie Taupin. To me, it was really old. Now I'm on the other side of it looking back. It's not so old anymore. We have a different impression of what 60 years was in 1970 when we were kids, and most of you probably weren't even born yet, to what it is in reality. And I don't feel the 60-year-old version of this song at all, but it still touches me to this day. Wow. The King Must Die, epic closing. So Elton John's second album, first album released in the United States, his self-titled album, is my #1 pick on this Elton John ranking video. I love it to pieces. It's a perfect record. There may be greater songs he wrote over the next several years on some of the other records, but start to finish, this is it for me. So, love Elton John. Thanks for watching. What a great musician. And Mazzy loves you.